Catherine had been married to Daniel Whitfield for 19 years when the call came at 4:11 on a Tuesday afternoon. A nurse from Mercy General. Massive heart attack. ICU Bay 7. Come quickly. She came quickly. She drove the 22 miles from their house in Concord with her car keys still in her hand, her coat half buttoned, the radio off because she couldn't think with the radio on. When she arrived, her husband had been in intensive care for 43 minutes. That was when she learned she wasn't his wife. The triage nurse looked at her clipboard, then at Catherine, then back at the clipboard. She said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but his spouse is already with him." Catherine said her name, said she'd been Catherine Whitfield for 19 years. The nurse turned the clipboard. The name on Daniel's wristband wasn't Catherine. On the line marked next of kin, spouse, that other name was the only one written down. Behind the nurse, the door to ICU Bay 7 swung open. A woman in her 40s walked out, ash-blonde hair pulled back, a wedding band on her left hand, a thin platinum stripe, the same band Daniel had worn since 2007. She was crying the quiet way you cry when you've been crying for an hour. She stopped at the nurse's station and asked, "Has anyone called Daniel's mother yet?" Daniel's mother had been dead for 8 years. Catherine's keys slipped out of her hand. They hit the linoleum, and the woman turned. She tried to give Catherine the polite smile you give a stranger. Then her eyes dropped to Catherine's left hand, to the ring, the same ring as hers. Her face changed slowly, the way a frozen lake cracks. She said, "Who are you?" Catherine said, "I'm his wife." The other woman said, "No, I'm his wife." You should understand something before this story goes any further. Catherine had not suspected anything. Daniel had kissed the top of her head when he left for work that morning. He had said, "Drive safe, Cat." He always called her Cat. He had been driving to her. The heart attack happened on the interstate, halfway between Concord and Manchester. The paramedics found 2 phones in his coat pocket. They called the contact labelled "Home" on each. Hers rang first. Catherine's rang second. That was how the other woman had gotten to Mercy General before Catherine did. That was how, for 43 minutes, Daniel Whitfield had only one wife at his bedside. And it had not been Catherine. There is a small windowless waiting room on the 3rd floor of Mercy General. The other woman led Catherine there because the corridor felt too public. They sat in plastic chairs facing each other across a low table covered in old magazines. Her name was Joanne Marsh. She was 46. She lived in a Cape Cod off Lake Massabesic in Manchester. She'd been married to Daniel Marsh for 12 years. She had a son. His name was Marcus. He was 11. He had Daniel's eyes and Daniel's stubborn cowlick. Catherine listened. She did not interrupt. When Joanne finished, Catherine set her phone on the table and turned the screen to face her. A picture of Daniel and Catherine at a wedding in Bar Harbor, June 2017. Joanne's mouth opened slightly. She said, "He was at a software conference in Denver that week." Catherine swiped. A photograph of Daniel and Catherine at a hospital. November 2019. Joanne said, "What was that?" Catherine said, "A miscarriage. Our second." Joanne turned her face to the wall. It went on like that. Every time Joanne said, "He was here," Catherine had a photograph of "he was there." Every conference Daniel had told Catherine about, he'd also told Joanne about, sitting at her kitchen counter, drinking the coffee she made him, lying about the city he was actually in. There was one moment that Catherine kept coming back to afterwards. She asked Joanne when Daniel had told her he was a widower. Joanne said, 6 years ago. He said you died of a stroke. I went with him to the cemetery in Boston. He showed me your grave." Catherine said, "Whose grave was it?" Joanne said, "I don't know. I never thought to check." Catherine stood up. She picked up her keys. She said, "I need to go look at his office." Catherine drove the 22 miles back to Concord with both hands tight on the wheel and her teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached for 2 days afterwards. Their house was a white colonial set back from the road behind 2 old maples. It had been built by Catherine's grandfather in 1962. It had been left to Catherine in 2006, 3 years before she married Daniel. Daniel had never owned a single nail of it. She went straight to his office. There was a steel filing cabinet he kept locked. He had told her the lock was broken. 3 years ago, while moving his old wallet to give to charity, Catherine had found a small brass key sewn into the lining. She had said nothing. She had put the key in a teacup at the back of her closet. She used it now. The cabinet opened on the first try. Inside were 3 things. The first was a manila envelope of photographs. A boy growing up. Marcus, age 4, on a beach. Marcus, age 7, at a piano recital. Marcus, age 10, holding a hockey trophy with Daniel's hand on his shoulder. There were 211 of them. Daniel had been the photographer in roughly half. He had been in the frame in the other half. The second was a passport. The photograph was Daniel. The name was Daniel Edward Marsh. The third was a small spiral notebook, a calendar. Each week was divided into 2 columns labeled C and J. Tell C the conference is in Denver. Tell J the conference is in Boston. C, anniversary 14th. J, anniversary 22nd. C, miscarriage November 2019. Be home 5 days. J, Marcus birthday November 7th. Be home weekend. The notebook went back 19 years. He had not improvised any of it. He had administered it. Like a small private business with 2 clients who could not be allowed to meet. Tucked into the back of the notebook was the deed to the Manchester Cape Cod. The deed was in Joanne's name only. Joanne had paid for it with money she had inherited from her father 6 years before she met Daniel. Catherine sat down on the floor of his office, surrounded by photographs of a child who was not hers, and she understood, for the first time in her life, exactly what kind of man she had married. He had owned nothing. He had been a guest in 2 houses for 31 years between them. She picked up her phone and called Joanne. She said, "I have something you need to see." Catherine returned to Mercy General at 1:20 in the morning, carrying a leather folder. Joanne was waiting in the corridor outside ICU Bay 7. She had not gone home. The night nurse let them both in. Daniel was stable but sedated. The wristband on his right arm still said Joanne M. Whitfield, next to next of kin, spouse. Catherine pulled a chair to the right side of the bed. Joanne pulled a chair to the left. They sat there for 38 minutes without speaking. Catherine had the folder open in her lap. She showed Joanne the deeds, the passport with the name Daniel Edward Marsh, the notebook. Joanne read the calendar pages slowly. When she got to her own son's birthday, J. Marcus birthday, November 7th, be home weekend. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. It was at that moment that Daniel Whitfield opened his eyes. He saw Joanne first. His expression softened. His mouth pulled into the very small beginning of a smile. Then he saw Catherine. The smile did not finish. Catherine leaned forward in her chair. She did not raise her voice. She said, "Daniel, Joanne and I have talked. We know about Marcus. We know about the Cape Cod. We know about the name Marsh. We know about the conferences that were never conferences. We know about the grave you took her to. We know about the notebook." Daniel's eyes moved between the two women. His mouth tried to form a word. The heart monitor beeped faster. Catherine said, "We are not here to forgive you. We are not here to fight over you. We are here to tell you that we know." A second monitor began to chime. A red light came on above the door. Two nurses and a resident pushed through at a run. One said, "Ma'am, I need both of you to step out, please." Catherine stood up. Joanne stood up. They walked out together. They did not look back. In the corridor, Joanne said, "Is he going to die?" Catherine said, "I don't know. But he doesn't get to die a victim of this."
Daniel Whitfield did not die that night. He survived a triple bypass and 3 weeks in cardiac rehabilitation and was discharged on a Thursday afternoon in October to a house he did not own. He had 2 houses to choose from, in theory. He had none, in fact. The Concord Colonial belonged to Catherine. She filed for divorce on the day he was discharged. The grounds were adultery. The settlement took less than 4 hours. The Manchester Cape Cod belonged to Joanne. But Joanne discovered, through her attorney, that her marriage to Daniel had never been legal. Daniel had never divorced Catherine. The license he had filed in 2014 under the name Daniel Edward Marsh was a forgery. She changed the locks on a Tuesday. Daniel's clothes were in 3 black contractor bags on her front porch when he came to collect them. Marcus was at hockey practice. Joanne did not open the door. Daniel ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment over a dry cleaner in Nashua. He was 61 years old. He had a heart condition, a felony forgery charge pending, no contact with his son. Marcus, 11, had asked Joanne one question on the night she sat him down to explain. He had asked, "Did he ever love us?" Joanne had told him the truth. She had said, "I don't know."
Catherine still lives in the Concord Colonial. The cabinet in the office is empty now. Sometimes, on weekends, an auburn-haired woman and an ash-blonde woman drive together to a hockey rink in Manchester to watch an 11-year-old boy play, because his mother has decided that he should have at least one woman in his life who chose to be there. Daniel had 2 wives, 2 houses, 2 phones and 2 names for 19 years. In one afternoon, in a corridor at Mercy General, he had nothing at all. If a story like Catherine's reminded you of someone, share it. Subscribe to Served Cold for more true stories of what happens when secrets finally come due.